If you look up Amber Invincible, you'll probably find a dozen videos about all of the reasons why Amber was wrong about what she did to Mark and the way that she reacted to Invincible's real identity. Well, turns out she was actually totally justified, and this is why. Hello! Thank you so much for letting me borrow your screen. I think this world kind of sucks, so let's build a new one. In the first 2 seasons of Invincible, Amber has acted as our protagonist, Mark Grayson aka Invincible's, main love interest all the way until season 2 finale. There was a point in season 1 where Mark's identity was actively revealed to Amber and she explained that she already knew. She shows resent in the fact that he lied to her about such identity, and this made people furious. I'm happy to say, in the weirdest way possible, she had a point. How does the knowledge of a situation affect the justification of one's actions? In many superhero stories, it's common to have a secret identity. Essentially, you'll have your interpersonal name, such as Mark Grayson in this case, as well as your hero name, such as Invincible. The general purpose of this is to prevent potential enemies from discovering your personal connections. If everybody knew how to find your family, your loved ones, people who were important to you, villainous people would be able to take hostages in order to control you. In season 1 of Invincible, Mark fought with himself about revealing his identity to his girlfriend at the time, Amber. There were times during this that he had to disappear from danger as Mark Grayson in order to protect people as Invincible. Amber actively antagonized Mark for vacating when danger was present, leaving him in an awkward position in being able to explain himself. This was further compounded by Mark being consistently late to dates, meetings with her family, and a whole slew of other events. Essentially, he had zero punctuality when it came to Amber, and this left Amber feeling unimportant to him. Up to this point, everything sounds pretty reasonable. If she was completely unaware of why he had to be late, or why he had to leave momentarily without any valid excuses, he would just seem like a complacent boyfriend. But she did know. When Mark finally decided to reveal the duality of his name, Amber admitted that she was aware the whole time. Rather than being upset about all of the nuances, such as being inattentive, she was upset that he lied to her. This left Mark obviously flustered and struggling to respond. And this is where the Amber Sucks Club really got a lot of its members. Now, I want to go ahead and say that this is a moment that really irritated me as well. When I saw this the first time that I watched Invincible, I was peeved. I was like, what do you mean? He's a superhero, dog! What is he supposed to do? He's got to keep quiet about this stuff, and maybe a little extra grace on him being late and stuff like that would have been awesome, instead of just pestering him and really like barreling down on him on why he's late all the time and all of this kind of stuff, and just kind of leave a, hey, you know, you can be honest with me. Or whatever. I don't know. I digress. After this point, Amber decided to break it off with Mark, though over time they did finally reunite, sharing some small communication about what had happened, but ultimately putting it all behind them. This was kind of where the topic fell off until the end of season 2. At one point, one of Mark's home species, the Viltumites, came down from space to blackmail him, specifically while he was on a date with Amber. Now, if you don't know, the Viltumite species is, well, it's what Mark is and what his dad is, and it's what gives him his superhuman capabilities. They're from another planet, another galaxy, very, very far away, and they are very similar to your standard Paragon archetype, like Superman. They just have insane strength, insane speed, faster than the speed of light, in fact, and they can fly. It's not specifically known how this Viltumite discovered his identity and who Amber was to him, but there's a million viable ways for this to have happened. There's a level of poetic irony here, in my opinion, when it comes to the fact that his identity being discovered is what got Amber in trouble. And I say that because it's what Amber was upset about in the first place, right? I mean, really awful way to discover that fact, but kind of poetic justice. Little overboard, but poetic justice, I guess. The actual reasoning behind the Viltrumite's appearance doesn't really matter as much in this context as the threat on Amber's life. Following this event, Amber went on to explain that when Mark's enemies enter the picture, these super powerful entities that can level cities, she loses all agency over the situation, loses all of her free will. And this conversation is what really broke it all down, and proved that she really did have a leg to stand on in season 1. Before I get too far into Amber's further explanation of everything that's going on here, I want to remind you to subscribe, in case you forgot to do that. In this talk about agency, Amber goes on to explain that she realizes that her problems are not as big as his. Invincible spends a Tuesday night literally preventing the Earth from being invaded by aliens looking to subjugate humanity, while Amber is dealing with college homework and social troubles. When shined in this light, it really does make it seem like her needs and desires are just completely dwarfed, and that's detrimental to her as a person. Mark is obviously and in parallel going through the same thing, and I did a whole video on that as well. Link will be in the description, or check the card. Just like she says, her problems matter too. Maybe they're not world-ending, maybe she isn't preventing the apocalypse, but they are her problems, and they matter to her. Now, this is a really awkward subject in my opinion, and it's kind of a tricky one, but it really does begin to serve a point that Amber is not capable of dealing with these problems. With Mark's level of problems. It's just not in her wheelhouse. She's incapable of doing anything about it, and unfortunately, in her terms, she is more often than not going to be a detriment way more than she's ever going to be a help. And she's just incapable of being anything else, at least at this moment. And unless something were to change, it's going to be that way. So, although it does suck, she still should tend to her own problems. Her own problems are not insignificant, but they are her problems and the problems that she has to deal with, even though there is people out there that are saving the world. And it's a really hard thing to swallow, honestly. It's a really hard topic because you see these people that are saving the world and you can't do that. You have to go back to your own life and your own problems that seem so small in comparison. When it comes to storytelling, there's a huge conversation about scope. Essentially, any problem can be substantiated in such a way that the conflict seems devastating, based on how you frame the world around the protagonist. If we were to treat Amber as the protagonist of the story, her struggles and aspirations dealing with schoolwork and college drama would be groundbreaking. But she's not. Mark is. And Mark's scope is much, much wider than Amber's. Simply, Amber is ethically inclined to ignore her own issues when he's around. To add that on top of her lack of safety around him, the danger she poses as being an asset of control against him, and a number of other things, there's no reason for them to be together. I would like to take a moment just to express the term sonder, which is essentially the idea of understanding that every single person in the world outside of yourself has a life that is equally complex as yours, if not similarly complex. We are not really capable of fathoming that, especially on a scale of like hundreds of thousands of millions of billions of people, right? So it's really difficult to understand that, but when you have a story like this where people are so vastly different, the term sonder, it becomes so much bigger now, because you have Amber, who has a standard human life, and you have Invincible, who is also Mark Grayson, who's living a duality of life. And not only that, one of them has to exist below their means and one of them has to exist above their means. And both of these characters are learning what it means to understand sonder. And it's such a wild concept. And this is kind of what their relationship has been building up to, in my opinion. It's understanding each other, what each other person is seeing. Because it's not obvious at first. You can tell us, oh, he's a superhero that saves the world, and that would mean nothing to us until it hits us in the face like a freight train. Only then do we recognize how complex the situation is and how complex somebody else's life can really be. Okay, so how does this prove Amber right? Though Amber wasn't necessarily justified in Mark lying to her in a vacuum, Amber is justified in not realizing the severity of Mark's world. She doesn't know the ins and outs of a superhero's identity, the struggles of what it takes to be a hero, and she didn't truly understand what kind of danger it may put somebody in to reveal something so heavy. It's simple to say that she was completely short-sighted when it came to her antagonizing Mark, but that's given we had Mark's context and Invincible's view of the world under our belt. Once she realized what Invincible's life really entailed, she was able to make a well-thought-out conclusion about how she feels about the relationship, about herself, and her true opinions on the matter. It may not have been handled well under a spotlight, but Amber was justified with what little information and insight she had available to her. All in all, Amber has definitely had some character growth and her ups and downs when it comes to the way that she interacted with Mark and how she dealt with their relationship as a whole. It's common opinion to disagree with how she acted towards Mark after hiding her knowledge of his heroism, but as a young teen with no grasp on the bigger world of superhumans yet, it's safe to call what she felt reasonable. People may have been furious when it happened, but how does the knowledge of a situation affect the justification of one's actions? Thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate you checking on my breakdown of how Amber feels about the entire situation within Invincible. I'm sorry if this made anybody upset. I'm not gonna take it back, but I will still apologize. If you like this, make sure to check out some of the other videos that I have. They should be right here, handcrafted, handpicked just for you. All of the other video essays that I have done. Please go check that out. I think you'll like it. Have a wonderful day, and thanks.